Well, welcome back to our 5-minute message series, and really excited to bring you a new mini-series within these 5-minute devos. We are going to be talking about the armor of God and spiritual warfare. And so this takes place at the end of the book of Ephesians. So we'll be looking at Ephesians chapter 6 as we talk about this. But before we dive into the text, for this first one, I just wanted to lay down some intro work on what spiritual warfare looks like. And so Lord of the Rings is one of my favorite movie series, and there's a spot in Lord of the Rings, The Two Towers, the second movie of the trilogy, where the city of Rohan is about to be attacked by an evil army that is coming in. And so Gandalf, he goes to try to convince the king to send his troops into battle to stop this force that is coming towards them. And Theoden, the king at the time, he doesn't want to risk his troops. And so he replies to Gandalf, he says, "I won't risk open war." And then Aragorn, who's sitting in the back at that point, he speaks up and he says, "Open war is upon you, whether you would risk it or not." In the same way, we are at spiritual war. Open war is upon us, whether we would risk it or not. One of the greatest lies of the enemy, of Satan, is that we are at peace. And so, but the reality is there are spiritual forces all around us that are seeking to influence us and that are seeking to have our hearts. And so before we jump to one side of the spectrum, what I want to talk about is the balance of spiritual warfare. What does it look like? How much influence do spiritual forces actually have on our lives? And one of Satan's strategies is to push us to one of two extremes. One is to push us into the area of unbelief, right? You've probably heard it said one of Satan's greatest lies is to convince the world he doesn't exist. Well, there's another extreme as well, and that's the extreme of superstition. If Satan can't get people to believe he doesn't exist, he will get people to believe that he has an outsized influence than what he actually has. So C.S. Lewis, he says it this way. This is in the intro to his excellent book, The Screwtape Letters. He says, "There are two equal and opposite errors into which our race can fall about the devils. One is to disbelieve in their existence. The other is to believe and to feel an excessive and unhealthy interest in them. The devils themselves are equally pleased with both errors and hail a materialist or a magician with the same delight." And so let's look at each of these in turn. Number one, superstition. This is the idea that there is a demon in every bush. There's a demon underneath every rock. They're causing us to do every bad thing that we can ever do. And you see this a lot when you hear about stories from the medieval church, the church during the Dark Ages, thinking that things like mold were caused by demonic possession before science figured out that maybe it's not demons, maybe it's bacteria or something else. And in the same way, we can do that in our hearts as well. Right? If we're always saying, especially if we're sinning or we're hurting other people and we're saying the devil made me do it, then that is giving Satan an outsized influence than what he actually has. Satan does not create evil in your heart. Satan cannot light the fire. All he can do is blow on the flames. And so the book of James chapter 1, it says, nobody can say God is tempting me, and I would add nobody can say Satan is tempting me, in the sense that each of us are dragged away by our own evil desires and enticed. And then what Satan can do is he can throw the bait out there, but he's not the one who forces us to bite on it. He can simply fan the flames that already exist in our sinful hearts and that need to be repented of. Secondly is unbelief. And this is a very common approach in our secular society. Everything that we see, everything that we don't have an answer for, we want to run an experiment on it. We want the answers. We want to figure out what's going on. We want to get down to the truth. And we have a tough time embracing the mystery or embracing something that God could do outside of our understanding, because that's how we're raised. And you see this a lot when it comes to evil and suffering. And so if somebody is suffering, we are rare to attribute that to a spiritual cause. Now, on the other side of that, if we only attribute suffering to a spiritual cause, if we say all you need to do is read your Bible more, all you need to do is pray more when someone is suffering or when someone is sick, that can be abusive spiritually. But on the other hand, if we are reductionistic and we never recognize spiritual causes to our suffering or to pain, then we miss out on something that makes us as complex as we are. And so the descriptors that Paul gives spiritual influence in Ephesians is powerful. But the one thing that we need to remember is no matter what, God has no rival and God has no equal. The victory belongs to Him. And that's what we're going to dive into next time.